I'm back. I want to talk about Casus Belli, the cause for war. So, Casus Belli is when you have a nation engaging in an act of belligerence against another nation. So, an example is in World War One, even after about 2.5 years of the war going on in Europe, the USA still was not in the war. So, however, the USA was providing support in terms of supplies. So, what the Germans decided to do is to enter into a campaign of unrestricted uh, submarine warfare against the supply ships going across the North Atlantic, the merchant ships. There was an incident where the Germans torpedoed a ship called the Lusitania, and when they did that, that provided the reason for the Americans to go into war because most of the Americans at that time didn't want to get uh, engaged in foreign entanglements, and that's it's one of the hallmarks of um, what the founding fathers talked about is don't get entangled in these foreign affairs. They're going to drag drag the union into all this work that they did to become independent, to build up the union, to you know get it to a point where you can finally break the yoke of those old colonial powers. That to get re-entangled with that would kind of diminish the project, the United States project that was happening. So the Lusitania, well, if you go back to, you look at a population, they may have a certain level of just not wanting to get into this sort of trouble. And in order to change popular opinion, something needs to happen to get people to say, oh, okay, so in the court of public opinion, something needs to happen to change that opinion. So the fact that across newspaper headlines that this civilian ship has been destroyed in cold blood then creates that case. And we can take that case and use that to authorize something like making or going into a war. Now we know with the Lusitania, and even I'm not entirely sure. I believe it was carrying munitions. It wasn't just completely civilian passengers. And so even now, I should know better than this, but I haven't done enough research. I'm just going off the top of my head, and so I'm just reflecting on things that I've learned. Um, that the idea was, I believe the Germans had intel that this ship was carrying munitions, and of course there were obviously civilians on the ship as well. It's just they were not aware of the type of cargo that was being carried. I just how this is such a thing with certain powers, countries, or these even we see in recent conflicts of hiding behind the populace, hiding behind the innocents, and then causing problems. Let me just say, in Iraq when some of the militants would go into a house where there's an actual family and then use that as cover, say, oh yeah, the Americans won't shoot on us. There's an innocent family here, and that creates all kinds of atrocities. So it's quite disgusting, and of course that keeps happening. And this is kind of vile as well, as to kind of use kind of a civilian shield and then put other munitions or what have you behind that human shield. Then what's going to happen. We saw this in Ukraine as well, as using a school as a base of operations to put munitions and other items in there. And then, of course, that then makes it a military target for strike, and it gets placed on a target package. So, yeah, just my pause here is it gets upsetting seeing weak men do stuff like this. That your case for war is so weak, your position is so weak that you basically have to hide behind some mama skirt with your soldiers in order to protect yourself, thinking that, okay, if the other side, if they're have any sort of moral standard whatsoever, that they're not going to fire upon us. So, hey, we're just going to do what we need to do from behind this level of cover. So, anyhow, got to get ranty there. Um, so, when we look at the casus belli, cause for war, we take a look at in our geopolitical situation today, when we look at our game board, is where are we seeing some uprises in the case for war? Okay, so we take the bombing of the Nord Stream pipelines. Look at that. It's so interesting that the EU leadership is so quiet about that. Okay, let's move on to something else. Oh, Speaker Nancy Pelosi goes to Taiwan. Okay, well, that's definitely going to infuriate the Chinese, because they even have it written in their law that Taiwan is an actual province of China. And of course, I'm not taking sides on that. That's a very nuanced and complicated. Well, side what I take is I'm an old United Nations chartered person. I do agree to the right of self determination. I've done a lot of model United Nations when I was younger, and there was always that right of self determination in what is an internal affair. And the right of self determination means that, hey, if a country or a group wants to break from the compact in which they are in, they have their right to do that through appropriate referendums, and or whatever the legal justification is for them to say, no longer want to be a part of that group. We want to go our way. And if there's a vast majority of the population that wants to do that, then we have to entertain that and allow that from a UN Charter stance. So, other cases for war, and we look at the Azerbaijan Armenia conflict. We look at what's happening in, it looks like, I think, the northeast area of Syria that's happening. You have weapons and money being supplied to Ukraine, and Russia's saying, well, don't do that. They've decided that through a referendum, again, that self-determination, whether the referendum is illegal or not illegal, regardless that there's been a United Nations vote on it. I think there's a lot of politicking in that situation. Hey, look, those areas of eastern Ukraine are ethnically Russian. So what are going to say? Hey, if you don't like being in Ukraine, get out, go to Russia. It's interesting from, well, let's take the folk that talk a lot about decolonization and oh my god, colonization, it's a bad thing, and yeah, we should think about decolonization, all that blah 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 blah. There's an element there that there's people who've been on that land for, and I'm talking about Ukraine here, and especially the Luhansk, Donbass area, where it was a part of Russia, didn't become part of Russia, became part or Soviet Union. Okay, sure, they did decide that they wanted to join over to Ukraine and become independent because Russia back after the Berlin Wall fell was just a pig pen of garbage, especially with Boris Yeltsin and the stuff that he was doing. It's just corruption, like just it was is an absolute disgrace by what you know Russian standards are today. There's a lot of cleanup that's been done on that. So you have to like really consider that if you're the person there in that place and you're getting tossed like a salad between these groups, that you know what you're gonna really want to join the group that's going to take the best care of you. And if your group that used to belong to finally came to their senses and reformed their ways and is cleaning up their act, you say, okay, we're okay to kind of join back with that again. You know what? Welcome home. Uh, I think that just goes for any group that doesn't feel at home and wants to go their way and then decide that, you know what, maybe that didn't work out. It's not working out quite well, or it takes something like that to happen for the group to clean up. Yeah, I'm in such a crap of a partner. I think of in a country standpoint that, you know what, I had my little bears had to go running away, and then hopefully that knocked me into my senses to pick up my socks and do things a little bit better. And then, the group that left finally says, "Oh, okay, we'll join back with you again." Just now it feels like home. That's a great story that, as far as I'm concerned. So, cases for war, you have to look around and you have to look at how much pushing and badgering some of our political class are doing. And you look at, again, sending Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. See, can we create a problem between China and Taiwan? Because, well, heck, then we'll get the USA involved in it because Build Back Better didn't pass. The CARES Act, yes, that did pass. That was a couple trillion there, and then the Build Back Better original was like about $4 trillion. How the hell are you going to pay for this stuff? You have to print, 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 print in order to do that. And the moment you start printing, well, then you know whatever techno trash European, I don't even know, think you call them technocrat politicians, or not even politicians, are stroking their cats in their high chairs, laughing kind of maniacally that everything's going according to plan, as the rest of the world just eats themselves. It's kind of interesting to see that a little bit of the tables have been turned. So you see that political class in the USA that we expect has connections to the Davos crew that wants to bring the US to their knees is going out and trying to push all these other places to create additional conflict, especially before the midterms are starting up. So look for this. And you have to give credit where credit's due. People like Putin are being calm and collected about this. They could bite. Putin could bite and say, "Okay, screw you. Yes, there was a bridge that was blown up on his 70th birthday. And it's kind of like a, you know, hey, screw you, guy. We're going to blow up your bridge and we're going to create little postage stamp things throughout areas of the Ukraine where you can pose in front of it of this bridge on fire and say, ha ha ha, look at this. Happy birthday, Putin. Hashtag Putin. Happy birthday. Here's your blown up bridge. And you could have expected a lot more. Well, there was something they hit substations after that and shut off the electricity. So, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to make it a little bit colder for you. But it wasn't like to the extreme level. They're not running stormtroopers all the way through Ukraine. So there's a level of escalation that could happen, that there is some reservation from the non-US, non-European contingents uh, in this overall diplomatic dialogue. And war is just a tool of diplomacy. As much as I don't like, like going and running over your neighbors and bullying and all this stuff. I don't like the fact that even the U.S. powers went through, okay, Libya, Iraq, Yemen. The list goes on. There's some memes out there, and they're not just like memes, more like an infographic showing that, oh, okay, if you want to say Russia has one level of aggression, I'm not apologizing for Russia in any way. Just saying there's facts that are on the table. There are facts that are in the record here. And you just go down the list of all the US aggression. And it's long. What, Bay of Tonkin, Bay of Pigs, bombing of Laos, the most bombed country in the world during the Vietnam time. And they weren't even a party to it. It just had people transiting, the wrong people were transiting through, and they just boom. So there's still a lot of unexploded ordnance in that country, which is the USA going in and saying, yeah, it was kind of bad. We're going to help you clean up that. Not really. If they were doing that, they would be virtue signaling that kind of stuff. So you look at the case for war that's erupting all over, and how much that these other countries are not biting. China's not biting. Russia's not biting really hard at that. They understand that there's some midterm elections going up. They're not going to start a major escalation and then have the incoming government say, major escalation, we just have to pick up on that and continue it through. No, there's a trial now here. What's the trial? Is pretty much, I think you could bet on that there's going to be a change in the representation in the House and Senate after the 2022 midterms. And those folk that are coming in, they will be on trial, assuming that the Senate and House switch to Republican control. Now it's the question of, do they go full on neocon and amp this thing up, or do they come to their senses and realize, you know what, peace is actually a good option. You can make good money in peace. You can fix the inflation problems, get the stuff that you need for your own people to thrive and do better, instead of, well, build back better and CARES Act and the other bills that we're trying to execute to get all that spending out there to help collapse the United States. Well, another way of doing that is just going to war. So the hope here and the miracle that we're looking for is for the new folk coming into play, that cooler heads prevail. That can we get back, handshake, and do business and make some money and be prosperous all together? Or do the rat ass board tippers have to come in, throw the game on the floor and saying, well, it's not going my way, so screw you all, I'm going home?